Welcome, and please let me say that if you ever have any comments that you'd like to post on the YouTube, if you're watching the YouTube video or the Facebook video, I always appreciate comments that you might have. Either way, of course, it's nice to know that you found it interesting. So with that, we'll go on to the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. And here is the screen share. And we are actually dealing now with the Kohen Gadol. Prior to this, we had dealt with the regular priests. That was last year. If you want to find those earlier recordings, you want to just do a search in this YouTube section, and just if you post Emor, E-M-O-R, I believe on a find, you'll get all the previous ones as well, so in case you're interested. So here we go. So we're continuing, as I said, that we had discussed yesterday that unlike his fellow priests, the high priest is not allowed to actually observe mourning rites. So we discussed the fact that in the procession to the place of burial, there are two opinions. There's Rabbi Yehuda, who says he's not allowed to go out and follow it at all. And the concern is that because he is grieving so much, he might wind up coming in contact with the deceased. On the other hand, Rabbi Meir is of the opinion that as long as he puts up does something to make a distinction. I mentioned the other day, like following in the following alley, not being in the same alleyway, it's not going to be a problem. And they disagree over that. And that under those circumstances, he's allowed to follow the procession. So,
Rabbi, oh, go ahead. I was going to say, Rabbi, if they found somebody dead, if a priest found somebody dead and there's nobody around, he could still.
Correct.
That was.
Yes, we mentioned that. Right. No, thank you, Harlan. You reminded me, of course, the concept of mate mitzvah, which I believe we did mention a couple of days ago, that if there's such a strong need to be respectful of the corpse, that if there's no one to take care of it, and the high priest is the one who finds it, the way the scriptural text is interpreted is to say that the high priest, even if he's high priest, even if he's on his way to perform the Yom Kippur rites, he still has to take care of the body because no one else is there. Of course, if someone else is there, that's a difference. That makes all the difference. And that is called a mate mitzvah. So going on here.
Wait, I just wanted to ask before I forget about Wednesday. Is that going to be a regular summer availability or is it just this past Wednesday?
That's a great question. So I'd say as long as Miles is in school, I'm not going to be available on Wednesday. That's the one day that I try to help out. Once he ends school, which is obviously going to be relatively soon, I'll talk to Sarah and see. Right now, I don't know for sure. So for example, if he's going to summer camp and she needs some help one day of the week, but I will let you know, okay?
Thank you.
I have a sense of what the schedule is going to be like.
Oh, thank you. Carry on.
Of course. No. I really look forward to starting the day this way. It's amazing. So to be with all of you. Vahu, and he, that is the high priest. Excuse me one second. Isha, a woman, bivtuleha yikach, in her virginity he will take. In other words, he's only allowed to marry a virgin. That's the only woman he is permitted to marry. So.
No Rashi.
No, I guess Rashi did not want to comment on that. All right, or didn't feel there was a need to. All right. Well, I would say that if I were to comment, these laws seem tough in our frame of mind. But again, this is going deep. He has a very, very high level of connectivity to the divine. And as a result, he also has to be in a place of obedience and willing to set aside his own personal desires and things with the need to fulfill divine command. Here we go. Goes on to define what it means by that, though. Almana, a widow, ugrusha, a divorcee, the chalala. A chalala is a woman who was born of a relationship of a priest who married a woman he wasn't permitted to marry. So it's sort of like a second degree of separation here, right? Here we go. Rashi just simply explains in Rashi's wonderful, terse way. Shenolda, she was born, this woman was born mipsule kahuna, from someone who had basically forfeited their priesthood by doing something like specifically marrying a woman. A regular priest, remember, is not allowed to marry a grusha and a halala. A regular priest is permitted to marry a widow, by the way. And also, of course, the requirement of, so clearly the requirement of betula, of virginity, is not required for a regular priest. It's only the high priest who has this particular standard. Halala, zona. So was there a question?
So you're saying a betula is a virgin, and isn't there issue when Christians say it, the Messiah, Jesus's birth is virgin? There's discussion about that.
Yes, of course. And they say it means in that context a young maiden. So I don't remember the verse.
Hold on, I got it. I just turned to it to
Can you
just
give
check
me
it.
the Hebrew, please? Give me the Hebrew.
Alma.
Alma is a young girl.
It's a young woman. It could be any kind of young woman.
Correct,
It's
correct.
not Na'ara and it's not Bitula.
Right. Betula
Right.
is the one who is not yet married, not
Yet. Yes.
has
Attached to anyone.
correct.
Is that the best way to say that? Maybe.
Well, I don't know. I'm not. Okay, so the word
Because if you're engaged, it's okay to engage, right?
Actually, the word batel, right? It's going to come from the word batel, and batel means sort of. It does mean sort of unengaged, right?
Mm-hmm.
No relationship. So if you say that something is batel, it means it no longer has the. Generally, it's used in that sense, right? That if something is batel, it means like uninvolved, right? Uninvolved.
Mm-hmm.
No longer. Generally, it's meant in that sense, but I believe in that sense the word betula means she has not had relationships. She has not had a sexual relationship with anyone.
Excuse me? How about a woman unto herself?
I'm not sure what you mean by that.
That she is just not attached. A woman unto herself.
Yeah, like single. It doesn't mean single. It does not mean single. Really, the word batel, honestly. So for example, if a certain person is yoshev batel, it means they aren't employed. So the word batel has that connotation to it, and that's where you get the word betula from.
So is there a Hebrew word for virgin?
That would be the word betula.
Okay.
How it's understood. So the English translation of virgin doesn't capture the Hebrew connotation because of its connection to the word batel. But it means she has had no relationship with a man. Okay? So zona, very often the word liznot means to go astray. That's what the word liznot means. And so, for example, it's sometimes used in connection with idolatry. In other words, to go astray after idols. The Jastrow translates it literally as degraded, and I believe goes on to explain, he's got at least a very nice little section there where he talks a little bit beyond that and says, we need to understand that it means one unfit to marry a priest. Et ele lo yikach. These he shall not, literally means acquire, but it means to acquire in marriage, right? Ki im, but rather betula me'amav. So it defines what it means by a betula, right? A virgin, a betula. I almost don't want to translate it, right? me'amav, from his own people, yikach isha, may he acquire a woman. So has to be Jewish, right? Has to be Israelite. I don't believe she has to be a Kohen, a bat Kohen. I don't believe this means that. So having, the nature of that intimacy and the discipline involved in achieving that intimacy is very important. I'm looking to see if there's any Rashi before we get to, no. All right.
Rabbi, could a priest marry a divorcee?
A regular priest cannot marry a divorcee. No,
Okay.
he's not. No, and
Well, he
Well, we could
can, but
speak
he will lose his status as a
he's
practicing
committing.
priest.
Right, he is committing a
Right.
sin. He is committing a sin. I'm gonna say something. I'm gonna share something with you by way of being transparent here, and that is that in the past, the word Zonah was also taken to understand a person who was born a non-Jew, even if that person converted. And the reason why is that the moral level of the people other than Jewish people or Israelites was considered to be lax. And for that reason, in general, they did not let priests. The halacha is that a priest is not supposed to marry a convert. These days, by the way, the conservative movement does not, I believe, hold on to that. It's a rabbinic provision. And of course, as I've told you before, so much stuff has to do with circumstances. And frankly, in my humble opinion, I don't believe that Jews nowadays have necessarily any higher standards regarding this kind of thing than non-Jews. And in fact, I know for a fact that there are obviously practicing Christians and certainly practicing Muslims and practicing people of other faiths who are very careful about their moral standards. And so anyway, yeah.
There is a Rashi for Yud Dalet.
Yes, for your Dalet?
Yes.
Okay, let me go back. I think we may have read it. I believe we did.
Yeah, maybe it's
As
on.
we did Chalala, right? He defines Chalala. Shenolda mipsulei kuna. We definitely did that.
Okay.
Okay. So this, I just want you to notice all this other stuff that we're not looking at. We're not even looking at it. And as I said yesterday, the reason I went to the Torah Tamima, that's this commentary, that's the Torah Tamima, is because I wanted to give people a taste of the kind of commentary that it is and how deeply he goes into this material. And I would say that it would be a dream for us to get through the Rashis, to accomplish reading the Torah with the Rashis, and then to come back and go and look at the Torah Tamima. So on to the next verse. V'lo yechalel zaro ba'amav. He should not. So this is a negative commandment, right? If a priest goes ahead and does this anyway. V'lo, he shall not profane, right? Chalel, chilul is the opposite of kiddush, right? Kiddush Hashem, sanctification of the divine name. Chilul Hashem, profanation of the divine name. And the word profane, although sometimes we have connotations of profane, like swearing, like uttering profanities, but nevertheless, I think if we reduce the connotation on that level, it's hard to do that, but to say basically it's not maintaining a level of significance and just sort of ignoring and not caring about it. At any rate, he should not profane his seed amongst his people. Is what
is that related to chol as opposed to
yes,
kodesh chol?
it is indeed. It is. That's exactly what the connection. So in other words, a non-sanctified day, a day that's not Shabbat, or a day that isn't a festival, is Yom Chol. It is absolutely the same root. Good point. So here we go. Okay. Ki ani Hashem, for I, the Lord, I Hashem, mekacho, sanctify him. In other words, make the priest distinctive, right? So lekadesh means to separate something out from everything else. And very, very recently, I've thought that what it means is significant. I think that that's a really lovely way to translate this. So, for example, Asher Kidshanu b'mitzvotav, who has made us significant through his commandments. So that's this notion of making this binary distinction between Kodesh and Chol is not a scientific distinction. It is a spiritual distinction. It is an intellectual, emotional distinction, but it has very practical outcomes. So, by the way, we talk about marriage, right, as kiddushin, right? It's also called nisuin, but kiddushin is basically translated as betrothal. So that when a man is mekadesh a woman, it means he is designating her, he is making her the significant woman in his life. And that's sort of not such a bad thought, to be able to have a relationship with someone so that they feel they are significant. They're not treated like everybody else. They're treated in a special way. So we had a professor of liturgy, Dr. Pedachovsky, you may have heard me mention him before. This is way back in rabbinical school, who was very helpful by translating the word kadesh, kadosh, because the word sanctified isn't an easy word to understand in English, and he used the word special. So that's the word I used to use for a long, long time until I came across the idea of significant, which I think clarifies it a little bit more.
So,
Go ahead.
so can we go with common or insignificant for profane?
Well, yeah, I think we can.
Because a whole
Yeah.
whole not a special day, is still a day, and it's just not it's not
Absolutely.
rotten. It's just not
It's-
special. It's not
That's right.
exalted. It's not whatever.
Yeah.
So
Very-
yeah,
So think about this, by the
or
way.
regular or average or something like that.
Unspecial.
Unspecial.
Know something, these two words, right, don't really gain meaning from being together. In other words, you understand Kodesh by understanding Chol, and you understand Chol by understanding Kodesh. That in a sense, they cannot have meaning without being binary.
So
Okay.
is the word chol, when it refers to sand, is that related because like maybe it's because it's all seems like it's all alike?
That's a great question. It may
Ooh,
actually
fun.
come from a different root that might be spelled the same. I would have to look. I don't know. By the way, we talk about regular kosher meat. There's a tractate in the Talmud called Chulin, and Chulin deals with the laws of meat that is consumed on a regular basis that is not kodesh, meaning it's not meat that is put up on the altar. And so the tractate itself is called Chulin, referring to non-sacrificial, non-sacred meat. But it certainly has to be treated in a special way. There's no question about it. All the laws of kashrut and trabering and, not mixing meat with milk, et cetera, et cetera. So but that's sort of another way of understanding it. But in terms of your question, Lauren, I don't know that there's a connection. I love what you said, but I'm not sure. Sometimes it comes from a different, from a different root. I'd have to check. And by the way, the word chala is not related to chol at all. So chol and halal, notice, by the way, words, Hebrew words that have a vav in the middle, like chol, you understand, very often represent a word where the second and third letters are double, halal. And very often in conjugating a verb that is this kind of word, it turns out that they're interchangeable on some level, depending on what significance they have in the conjugation. in the verb conjugation. So let's keep going. V'lo yechalel zaro. He should not profane his seed. Ha'im nasa achat min hapsulot. So from this we can infer, right? Because it says he shouldn't. So if he does in fact marry one of those women that he is not supposed to marry, that are pasul to him, they are not capable of, he is not capable of creating kiddushin with them, I believe. Now, I could be wrong. It could be that the marriage is still considered a marriage, right? There are situations where if a Jew marries someone else, okay, that it is not even considered a marriage. And we use the term kiddushin tofsin, that they catch, that the marriage catches. It is, in fact, a legitimate, from a marriage standpoint of view, which is sort of the legal element of the relationship, it's considered a legal marriage, but nevertheless is not valid in terms of his kahuna, his priesthood. Okay. Za'o heimena halal. Okay. His seed, in other words, his offspring from this relationship, heimena, from her, halal is considered a halal, profaned, midin kedushat kahuna. Notice how halal and kedusha are sort of put together here in opposition, right? They are profaned from the status, I would say this way, of the holiness of the priesthood. So they cannot function as priests at all. Remember, there are also perks that go along with being a priest. So, for example, a priest is allowed to eat truma, which is a certain kind of offering that is given to priests, okay? Essentially, if it's a crop, if it's from the crop, it is 1/50th of the crop is given to priests as truma. Non-priests are not allowed to consume it. We've talked about this before, and a priest has to consume it in a state of purity. It is a very primary level of something sanctified, and there are degrees of sanctification. Truma is like one of the lowest levels of something that is considered sanctified. So only priests, so a halal would not be permitted to eat truma. On the other hand, I believe if a priest were to marry a non-priest woman, a woman who's not a Kohen, who's not a Bat Kohen, his wife is absolutely able to eat truma with him. And as long as she is a legitimate person for him to marry. Let's keep going on a little bit more. Oh, we're done. We're done on that. So we actually are starting a new subject here. And I'll go ahead and we'll just go ahead and do it, right? Vaydaber Hashem spoke El Moshe Lemor, to Moses, saying, right? Daber El Aharon, speak to Aaron Lemor, saying, Ish mizar acha, a person from your offspring, from your seed, the Dorotam, for all generations, in other words, for generation, according to the generations, Asher Yevomo, who has within him a defect. Lo yikrav kriv lechem le'elohav. He should not draw near to offer up the food of his God. So in other words, and he talks about what eventually the Torah will tell you what, quote, defect, quote, we are talking about. I think I've mentioned this. This is where it's made very clear in the Torah that despite the fact that this person is exempt from offering up food at the altar, from bringing sacrifices, nevertheless, he is considered a full priest. And since priests are entitled to eat food that comes from sacrifices, he is not exempt from that. he is allowed to participate fully on that level. It's just that he can't minister at the altar. So these are all these kinds of disciplines, you might say, or rules that involve the priesthood. So that along with all the perks and the benefits, there are also requirements that are pretty tough and that try to balance out the nature of this position. Let's go on. Here we go. Lechem Elohav, the bread, literally, right, of his Elohim. Ma'achal Elohav. So Rashi says, we don't just mean bread, we mean food, the food of his God. Kol Seuda, any meal, Kruya Lechem, is also referred to as bread, right? It's a figure of speech that where we take a part of an object and describe the entire object by its parts or by a part of it. So for example, a long, long time ago, when a person at the hotel, a valet at the hotel could be referred to as the buttons because of these fancy buttons he'd have on his coat. So, but it was really referring to the valet. Here we go. So he gives an example in the book of Daniel, chapter 5, Avad Lechem Rav. He made, and there's the Lechem, right? He made a grand feast. And of course, you may remember Belshazzar's feast. That's the chapter where you find Belshazzar's feast here, right? Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. Obviously describing a certain attitude. I don't think that that attitude was limited to Belshazzar, but it just, that was where the writing appeared on the wall, and it's just not the way to live your life. We will stop here. I'm going to just mark it back on this page to pick it up tomorrow. God willing. Let's see if I have this here. Make sure I got it. Can I put it up? It's not marking for some reason. Never mind. I will stop the share. It's great to see everyone. We have a minion if you want to say Kaddish de Rabbanan. So if you can hang in there, let's go ahead and do that. I just need to see everybody.
Please stop the recording.
Oh, yes. So sorry. Thank you for reminding me.